Attorney Nancy Spain is a co-founder of the law firm of Spain, and Varnet, whose attorneys practice principally in the areas of general estate planning, probate court matters, including estates and guardianships, corporate law, real estate, employment, and family law, with a concentration in issues unique to families with loved ones who are disabled or elderly. Nancy is a graduate of Connecticut College with distinction in her major, of Case Western Reserve University's School of Law, and has completed several courses in tax and estate planning at John Marshall Law School. She's a charter member of the Academy of Special Needs Planners and volunteers as a pro bono guardian ad litem through the program at Chicago Volunteer Legal Services. She's a member of the Chicago and Illinois Bar Associations and has been actively involved in drafting legislation involving probate and guardianship issues. In addition to speaking on government benefits, guardianship, and trust matters before parent organizations, state and local bar, and bankers associations, Nancy also counsels Chicago area corporate entities regarding their duties as legal guardian of a disabled person or as trustee of a special needs trust. One of the documents that I emailed to all of you last night is a full bio on Nancy and Spain, and Varnet, so there's a lot to learn about them if you're interested. So please help me welcome Nancy Spain.
Okay, so how many of you are parents of students who are still in school up to age 22? Apparently a majority of you. Okay, how many are parents of children who are under the age of 18? A couple, okay. I'm going to go over government benefits first and a little bit about transition at 18. The transition at 18 is a little bit different than the transition at 22. But there still could be questions if your child is still in school that affect you even if your child is 18. But at 18, as you know, the parent loses control over making all the decisions. The child is considered an adult and competent unless determined to be disabled by a court. So you have to make that decision at around age 18. Does your child need a guardian? Do you have to is that necessary for you to be able to make decisions for your child? Or are there other alternatives that are less invasive that might be still appropriate to be able to handle situations? So there are three different kinds of government benefits. There are welfare-based or needs-based, based on assets and income. And there are some that are called entitlements based on having paid into the Social Security system. And then there are sliding scale benefits, and that's actually what this slide is, SNAP and that kind of benefit, Section 8. Those are sliding scale, and I'm not really going to have a lot of time to talk about those. But again, those are based on whether the person is eligible for it, but whether the income of the unit that's being considered allows them to access those kind of benefits. The importance of knowing the government benefits and around this age, when your children are this age, is when there's a change. At age 18, your child becomes a family of one for the purpose of accessing government benefits. No longer are your assets deemed or considered available to the child, so that planning can be done differently, assuming that your child is economically and otherwise in a position to access the benefits. So the other thing that's important to understand at this time, and I wanted to just briefly talk about the trusts that are available before I get into the other part, because I want you to understand that these are the kinds of things that these trusts are used in order to make your child eligible for the government benefits. There are ways that you can handle his or your child's assets or yours, depending on if your child has any, and your planning for later in life. But you need to understand that there are different kinds of trusts and different uses. So there are basically two types based on the kinds of source that the trust had. Is it your money or was it the child's money? And we can get into what it determines to be the child's money. So it's called a first-party trust or a third-party trust. A third-party trust is your money or someone else's money, anybody's money, but not the child with a disability. A first-party trust is a trust that is assets that are legally the owner, or they're legally owned by the child, him or herself. And it can be, for example, the results of a personal injury, if perhaps there was an injury at birth and there was a lawsuit and the child came into an award for that, based on that lawsuit, that would be the child's money. Even if you brought the lawsuit, you're the parent, you're the guardian, whatever, it's still the child's money for government benefits purposes. Perhaps grandma left money directly to the child. Maybe you set up a UTMA, a Uniform Transfer to Minors Act kind of account. Those are things that are actually assets that belong to the minor or the child, and if those are the kinds of assets that are involved, they cannot be put into a third-party trust. And commingling the monies from the third-party trust with child's money is a serious problem, and causes the trust to be held. It has to have certain kinds of language, and it would make your child ineligible. So it's very important to understand not to commingle. A third-party trust is one that you might set up. It gives you, or the trustee, discretionary power to make distributions for the benefit of the child. This is often, it's usually revocable until it's funded, and it's often not funded until both parents pass away and their estate pours over into it, or there's life insurance or some other funding source. There is no payback on the third-party trust. This is your money or your parents' money or your siblings' money that's being put into this third-party trust, so the government can't tell you that you have to have a payback. The first-party trust, where the money belongs to the disabled child, at the death of that child, there's a payback to the government. And I'll explain a little bit later why that's the case, but it allows the child to have the benefit of a trustee paying for things out of that money, and at their death, then the child has to, the trustee has to make a payment back. So the first party trust, again, this is the child's own money, whatever the source, meaning a PI case, maybe it's child support, maybe it's a UTMA account, whatever the child source, it belongs to the child. It must be irrevocable. The beneficiary has to meet the definition of disabled, which I'll go into in a second. The assets must be held and used for the sole benefit of the child, and there are lots of new rules. Social Security put out new POMS, P-O-M-S, and in my handouts you'll see the more things that have the term POMS. It's a Program Operations Manual System, and it's the rules that Social Security uses to govern how it acts towards its beneficiaries, towards trusts, and all of that sort of thing. So there are recently new POMs about first-party trusts and how they can use the money for the person. And sole benefit means literally for the sole benefit of the beneficiary, the child with a disability. The beneficiary the child must be under the age of 65 to establish one of these first-party trusts, and it must include a payback to the state at the death of the beneficiary. There are also pooled first-party trusts. These are managed by nonprofit. They're generally smaller amounts of money. They pool the money to get a better rate of return, but they basically act like the first-party trust and are required to be used solely for the benefit of the individual. And with a pooled trust, it can either be payback to the state, or some of the funds can remain in the pool for other people to be able to use. This is often used in cases, as I said, where there's not a lot of money and you don't have a proper person who could be trustee, or it's not enough and a bank or a fiduciary is not going to be the trustee. So the Supplemental Needs Trust is a way that you can make your child eligible for benefits after the age of 18 when your assets that you have right now don't deem to the child. Because government benefits such as SSI, which is Supplemental Security Income, and Medicaid, and I'll explain why those two things are most important, are needs-based, and their assets only, the child can only have a certain amount of income or a certain amount of assets that belong to them in order to access those benefits. So a way in which you can, especially after you pass away, your assets don't go into your child's name, they go into a supplemental needs trust that can provide things, and they aren't considered resources for your child, and resources, excess resources, are what keep your child from being eligible for benefits. Okay, so these are the kinds of benefits that we're working towards by setting up trusts and planning in advance. These are the things that you are going to want to have access to and have your child have access to, and by doing that planning. Okay, so I mentioned the three kinds: needs-based, entitlement, and sliding scale. Needs-based are specifically Medicaid and SSI. SSI, again, is supplemental security income. It's really important that as you go forward in planning and talking to people and advocating for your child, that you understand the difference and make sure you know what your child gets. Is it SSI, or is it SSDI, or is it childhood disability benefits, which is CBD? I'll get into those in a minute. Okay, so with needs-based, there are asset and income limits. And one of the handouts that you got probably with the email is that a list of the kinds of things that are the limits. What are the asset limits that a person can have at age 18? Well, they can have up to $2,000 in cash or cash equivalent. That includes anything, investments, IRAs, anything that could be converted to cash. They can't have more than $2,000. And they can't have a life insurance policy on their life greater than a face value of $1,500. Car is an exempt asset, and a house that they live in is an exempt asset. That's often not something an 18-year-old has, but later in life, those are exempt. So the thing is, the asset limit is very low. $2,000 is not a lot. So the planning, you have to do the planning. Entitlement benefits are SSDI, that's Social Security Disability Income, and CDB, Childhood Disability Benefits, and Medicare. With SSDI and Childhood Disability Benefits, a child would get 2 years after being entitled to either of those two, gets Medicare, even under the age of 65. Now, if a child works and someone came up to me and said that the child is 30 and gets SSDI based on his own record, well, that's possible. The point is, SSDI, Medicare are based on the number of quarters that a person works. And a person who is younger and is disabled needs to work fewer quarters in order to access disability or Social Security when they turn 62 or 65 or 70, whenever they decide to take it, but after 62. And the number of quarters for a person without a disability is 40 quarters, but younger people need fewer quarters in order to access the benefits. A quarter is basically a certain amount of money earned in a year. So they're called quarters because the most you can earn in 1 year, no matter how much you make, is four quarters. But so sometimes for children who work but make a very minimum wage or less, or work in a workshop, it takes them 2/3 of a year to earn 1 quarter. So it's based on the income, and it changes with income requirements and COLA when things go up each year. Okay, so if a child can get disability on his or her own record, childhood disability benefits are based on the parent's record. If a parent worked and paid into the Social Security system and has enough credits for his or her own record to get, at whatever age, disability or Medicare and Social Security, then the child, if the child meets the requirements can access the parent's record when the parent retires, becomes disabled, or dies. So the parent has worked and paid into the system, and let's say becomes disabled at 50. If the child is over the age of 18 but was disabled prior to the age of 22 and has continuously been incapable of working, the child can access SSDI, actually it's childhood disability benefits, based on the parent's record. If the parent, let's say, gets $2,000 in disability, the child gets 1/2 of what the parent would get. It's not taking away from the parent, it's in addition. So if the parent gets the $2,000 for disability, the child would get $1,000. Sliding scale are these sorts of benefits, SNAP in Section 8. The way in which money is expended out of special needs trusts can affect SNAP benefits in Section 8. So it's important to understand if your child does get these benefits, you need to think about how the planning might affect them. And in most cases, if money is paid out and the child is counted as income to the child, it could affect Section 8. It just would make their rent slightly higher. So these are based on sliding scale, and each one is got a separate scale for how they decide eligibility. Okay, the next important thing to understand is what does it mean to be a disabled person for Social Security purposes? And what is it to be continuously considered disabled, which is necessary to be able to access the government benefits that would come from childhood disability benefits or Medicare. Social Security defines this as the inability to engage in substantial gainful activity. SGA is an acronym that you'll probably hear a lot, substantial gainful activity. It means the ability, if you cannot engage in substantial gainful activity, it means the child is incapable of earning $1,180 a month. That is the current dollar amount for 2018. The inability has to be from a disability that is diagnosed and is expected to last at least a year, if not for their lifetime. So the inability to earn $1,180, if a child works 40 hours a week at Jewel for minimum wage, that child is going to be able to earn more than $1,180 a month. So just to give you an idea about what that is, so not that anybody can really live on $1,180 a month, but that's what the government has determined to be a definition of a person with a disability, the inability to earn that amount of money. Okay, so if a child is considered disabled for Social Security purposes, and the parents are still working and not retired, not disabled, then the child is not going to be able to access benefits based on the parent's record. They're going to be able to access supplemental security income. If they have the financial eligibility, meaning they have basically no assets other than less than $2,000, they're entitled to $750 a month SSI, and that's the maximum. So if your child, and people need to know whether their child is getting SSI or something else in order to understand some other issues that come up. If your child gets SSI, the issue of the 1/3 reduction is an important part. 1/3 reduction happens if the child is living at home with you and you don't charge the child his or her fair share of living in the household. The government says, well, we're going to pay you $750 if you need to have everything taken care of. But if your parents are providing housing and food, we don't need to give you the full $750. We're going to subtract 1/3. So we're going to give you $500. That's the current year's income amount at the 1/3 reduction. That's $500. Okay, so, and the needs-based, that just is other things that need to be the eligibility issues. They have to be a resident. They don't have to be a citizen, but they have to be legal resident. They have to meet the asset limit and the income limit. If the child has other sources of income, earned or unearned, those amounts of income do reduce the $750. So if they're not paying their fair share in the home, this $500 could be further reduced by earned income or by unearned income, and I'll go over those in a minute. Okay, so unearned income could be, for example, if they get a stipend, if they get, let's just say grandma gives them $100, within 10 days at the end of the month, it must be reported to Social Security that the child got unearned income of $80. And I say 80 because the first $20 that's given to a child with a disability on SSI is disregarded. And that's just a general disregard. So the point is, as a parent, you could give your child $20 to go to the movies, and that would be fine. You could not give your child $50 to go to the movies and get a pop and go out to dinner, because you're giving unearned income to your child, which would reduce the SSI. It is kind of ridiculous, but that's $20, and it's been $20 forever. Okay, so if the child does get unearned income, it reduces the SSI dollar for dollar. The government says if you're getting income from somebody else, and it's not necessarily taxable income, it could be a gift, it's just for Social Security purposes, it's considered income. It reduces the SSI dollar for dollar. If a child works and earns, let's say, $200 a month, $20 is disregarded. The first $65 of earned income is disregarded, and the balance reduces SSI 50 cents on the dollar. The government wants to encourage working so that only 50 cents of each dollar earned reduces the SSI. So if a child does work, they can do better than $750 per month if at 50 cents on the dollar of what they earned. So they can come out better. ISM is another acronym. It's in-kind support and maintenance, and that's what causes the 1/3 reduction. If a parent or someone else, a trust or an aunt or a cousin or whatever, provides a housing and support, then that's the income, that's unearned in-kind support income, and that causes the 1/3 reduction. Okay, so if your child lives at home and you want to not have them get the full $750, and in some cases it's important for the family to have that income to help with household expenses, the child can pay whatever the fair share. And in most states, it is literally that they take the household expenses and divide by the number of residents in the home. In Illinois, there's a case that says fair share is the contribution of the child to the household, not necessarily taking the numbers to literally the share that the child has as to the number of people in the home. So let's say you charge $400 of rent. It's not rent to you, and it's not income to you, because it's reimbursing you for obviously what you are providing. You're providing a home with heat and water and electricity and garbage collection, and you're paying taxes, and you're keeping the household together. So the child is reimbursing you for an expense that the household has. It's not income to you, not taxable income to you. Okay, so you get $400, and some parents say, oh, I can't charge my child rent for living at home. I mean, he's 18, he's still in school. The thing about it is you can launder the money, and I use that term so you remember it, and it's legal laundering. And what happens is you take in the $400 as reimbursement for providing the household and providing the food and other things that go into what's called a household expense. And you can take that $400 and if you need to, use it to pay the light bill and the mortgage or whatever. But if you don't, you can put that in an account. You can open a bank account in your name. It's your money. You took it in. It's reimbursement to you. It's your money. You open a bank account and you have it pay on death, because you can open an account that says pay on death, and you pay on death to the supplemental needs trust that you create for your child. And it's a way of kind of beginning to save money for that trust that you're going to hope to fund at your death. It is your money. If you needed it, you could access it. It's going to be taxable to you, but if you have it in a bank account and it's only $400 a month, it's not going to provide a lot of extra income that will be taxable to you. But again, it's a way of, it's your money, you've laundered it, you've made it your money, and then you're putting it in an account which would then go to the Supplemental Needs Trust. But again, that's only on your death, and if you needed it in the meantime, you could certainly access it. Okay. Entitlement benefits, as I said, those are SSDI, Medicare, and childhood disability benefits. These are not reduced by earned income. These are based on either the parents or the child's contributions to Social Security and on FICA, so that they can access those. Again, this is the childhood disability benefits. The key is that the onset of the disability has to onset prior to the age of 22, and they have to be continuously incapable of working until the date that they would access the parents' benefits. They can't be married unless they are married to another person who is a DAC. So another name for acronym is DAC, Disabled Adult Child. So they've changed it recently to call it CDB, but in the past you may read things that talk about DAC, DAC. And the thing about the marriage issue is, if your child is not yet getting benefits, but will when you retire, your child is not a DAC, or child is not someone getting benefits, they're only in waiting or anticipated, so that if your child or a son or daughter marries another person in waiting, that's still going to throw them off. You have to be receiving the government benefits on the record of your parent, and so does the person they marry. So a child can get SSI and SSDI at the same time. If the child gets disability benefits on their own record or from a parent, and it's less than $750, the child will get the SSDI or childhood disability benefits, let's say of $500, and then they would get $250 of SSI. So if they're getting dual benefits like that, they still have to play by the SSI rules. And as I said, the SSI rules are more strict. Earned income reduces it, and there are stricter rules about the household ISM. If a child is getting SSDI or childhood disability benefits, it doesn't matter if they live at home with mom. There's not a 1/3 reduction of SSDI, okay? And we already did that. Okay, one of the things that's kind of new, does anybody know about the ABLE Act? You heard of it? A few people? Okay. This came into being about, the law is from a number of years ago, but it took the states generally a year or more to get the rules together and plan the programs for the states. It is actually a law that was brought by into the tax code, the Internal Revenue Code. If you know that I'm sure you know, there's 529 plans that allow for saving tax-free for the benefit of a child who's going to go to secondary education. And when you access that and pay for tuition, it's not income, it's not taxable, and as long as it's used that way, all the income that was earned while it was you were putting money in, and when it was used to pay this tuition, it's not taxable income. And there was a father of a person with a disability who said, it's not fair, I can't do a 529 for my child with a disability, he's not going to college. Shouldn't there be some way that I can save tax-free? So that's how the ABLE Account Act came into being. It was determined that maybe that's something that should be provided. So it's based on the 529 section, which is a section of the Internal Revenue Code that also has the college tuition, but it's a second part of that, and it allows collection of money, but the rules are very different. You cannot just assume it's going to be like the 529 for college. So it's been adopted by a number of states. Illinois is part of an alliance of 12 or 13, mostly central, Midwestern states, and Save with ABLE, the bottom line there, is the place that you can go and look into what there is and how you access it. Okay, so some of the limitations, unlike the 529 for college, if your child is on SSI, if the account gets to be $100,000, SSI stopped. It's not terminated in terms of ineligibility, it just is not paid out. And if the ABLE account pays for something related to the disability, maybe transportation issues or a new wheelchair or whatever it is that's needed, and the account gets below 100,000, SSI would resume without reapplication. Medicaid also there's a cap. It is the cap of the 529 plan for the state. So different states have different caps. Illinois, the cap for a 529 plan is 400,000. So if the account gets over 400,000, then Medicaid would stop. There's only one account per person, unlike a 529. You can have grandmas and everybody do 529s. For an ABLE account, the disability must onset prior to the age of 26. Originally, the age was 46, and the government, in trying to negotiate to get this passed, a concession was made to lower the age limit, and it would definitely, and for the government and the government accounting, they looked into it, and the cost difference was going to be substantial, and Republicans said, well, we're not going to allow that much to go tax-free. So they reduced the number of people who would be able to use it to those whose disability onset prior to 26. The annual contribution is $15,000. That's also the same as in the Internal Revenue Code. Gifting, annual gifting that doesn't count for a gift tax. You don't have to report them, and that amount goes up generally each year, although it doesn't go up every year, but it does go up. It just went up in 2018 to $15,000. And the annual contribution is from any source, whatever. So it can't just be 15 from somebody and then something from another person. It's total 15,000. And it's really important that you don't overfund it. There are some penalties that I'll talk about in a minute. One of the new things that came in with the 2017 Tax and Jobs Act is that if a person who has an ABLE account works, they can add their earned income up to the federal poverty line. So if you or a grandparent or somebody funds the ABLE for $15,000 and the child earns $11,000, the child can put $11,000 into the ABLE. So I mean, it could get to be $100,000 fairly quickly if you're able to do that every year. But again, if the child earns close to 11 or 12,000, that's kind of close to SGA. So I'm not sure how many, and that's a gross amount. So it would have to be, it's unlikely that it would be 11,000 that would be added as a regular thing. Any gift to this, if that's the word, any payment into it, like starting the 15,000, if grandma does that, it is not tax deductible. It's not like you're putting it into an IRA and you get a deduction on your tax return. It's just a payment. Okay, and if other people give it, it's not a charitable gift. It's not, as I said, it's not pre-tax. The growth and inside the account, though, like a 529 or an IRA, grows without tax repercussions annually. In other words, any income that it earns, it just rolls over and stays in there, and there's no tax return required. What's important to understand, too, is the limited distribution that can be paid out of it has to be related to the disability. It's actually pretty broad, and I have the list is coming up in a minute, but it has to be related to the disability. And if not, there's a 10% penalty, which is kind of like an IRA if you take it out earlier. And the payment, if it was paid out for something, that is then income taxable to the beneficiary. One of the other things that happened with the tax code from 2017 is that up to 15,000 of a 529 can be rolled over. That's not in addition to the 15,000 that you can put in. That would be in lieu of. So if you have started, or someone has started, a 529 for your child with a disability, that 529 can be rolled over into an ABLE, but only 15,000 a year. Okay, so only expenses related to the disability, improving their health, independence, quality of life. I mean, kind of most of the stuff that they do, and it includes housing, which is going to be, I'm going to tell you in a minute, is a big deal. But one of the few things that it won't pay for is a vacation that is just for fun. If it's a vacation that is organized by a group that plans for persons with disabilities to travel and learn, that's okay. But if it's just a family vacation, that's not going to be okay, because that's not really related to the disability. Important to keep record of expenditures. You can be asked at any time about what the money is being spent for. These are some of the examples that it can be, and there are two on here that are particularly meaningful. Housing. I told you earlier that if anyone other than the person himself provides housing and food, they get a 1/3 reduction of the SSI. This kind of account, the ABLE, is considered the asset of the person with the disability, but it's not a resource. So it's an exempt asset. It's like the house or the car or other exempt assets, an exempt asset. So it's been determined that if the child uses his own money to pay for housing out of this account, it's not a 1/3 reduction, because it's not somebody other than himself making the payment. Even if mom and dad put the 15,000 in, the ABLE account is considered to be his or her money. So one of the ways in which families have used this in a very creative way is 15,000 is put in. If you had been normally paying for the rent and having a 1/3 reduction, paying rent in another facility, for example, in their own apartment or in some sort of group home, then the child got a reduction. But this way, the parents can put the money into the ABLE account. The ABLE account can pay the rent, and the child will not have a 1/3 reduction. So it's a way, again, to kind of launder this money that mom and dad are doing to pay for housing and have it not count against the child. So that's one way in which this has been a very a nice expansion of the tools that are available to help a fairly independent child with disability. The other is the funeral and burial expense. One of the things about that OBRA trust, that first party trust that I mentioned, when it's the child's money, That cannot be used after the death of the child to pay for a funeral or burial. And so a lot of families assumed that this account would pay for a burial. And they find out that no, the government has to have a payback prior to any use of the funds for funeral or burial. This, however, an ABLE account can be used to pay last administrative fees, burial expenses, and then there's a payback to the government. So that's another advantage. Okay, so the payback to the government, and it's up to the amount of medical assistance. So to the extent that Medicaid had paid expenses for the child, with the ABLE account would only pay up to the amount that Medicaid had paid. So if it had more in it than Medicaid had paid for the child, then the money could go someplace else, and it would be in the estate. Practical concerns, only one account. That's very important that you only have one account. And there are some safeguards in Illinois about that. If two people sign up on Illinois, it's going to kick one out. But you can sign up for an ABLE account in other states, and some other states may have something that's better, that you like better, that you'd rather use. And when Illinois did not have its ABLE account yet, a lot of people used Ohio because it allows other people from other states to use and apply for their program. Some states, Florida and Tennessee, for example, do not allow out-of-state people. So, important that you make sure that there is only one account. There's a potential for overfunding if you didn't know and you make a deposit. You want to make sure that you're not overfunding. There's the payback requirement. One of the issues that there are two issues that are still outstanding. One is the interaction with guardianships. Right at the moment, this kind of account, if you are guardian for your child and guardian of this person only, you as guardian cannot open the account. You have to be guardian of the estate. And many families, if the child doesn't have any money, they don't go to the added expense of becoming guardian of the estate because there's no money to have an estate. And so they are not able to open an account. We're working on how we're going to fix that. I just had a conversation with the head of the ABLE organization, and she said that they are trying to figure out what they're going to do about it. It's hard. We can't necessarily go and change the courts, and how are they going to deal with it? If you go to the courts and become guardian of the estate, is the court going to want to have jurisdiction, which they do normally over an account that's in the name of the estate of the person with the disability? So we're working on that. If you are aged under power of attorney, you can open an account, or the child himself, if he or she is competent and doesn't have a guardian, he or she can do it himself, with your help, obviously. It doesn't protect from fraud and undue influence. A high-functioning person who has access, and that's kind of the point of this, the child has access. You can have a credit card or a checking account that's attached to this, and it allows independence of being able to go to the movies without asking mom and dad for the money. But it has to be stressed that the child can't pay for his friends to go to the movie with him. He can pay for his own ticket, but he can't be using the money for somebody else. And so and it can be even more exploitation as an issue if it's, let's go buy a car, or let's go buy, something else, and they get talked into things. So there's really not a protection against that. And you cannot put child support payments directly in here. If a child is getting child support payments from a parent who doesn't have custody of the child, then they cannot be put into an ABLE account. They can be put into an OBRA trust, and I can explain that in a minute. But even though the child support is the child's money, it can't be put in there. Another option for independence is a TrueLink card. Has anybody heard of this? TrueLink is actually it's the name of the card. It's the company. It's basically like a reloadable visa, and it is can be customized and actually must be customized in order not to be a problem for Social Security or SSI, for SSI purposes. The point is, if it were just a credit card and the child had it, SSI says, well, that's a source of income and that's a resource, so that's a problem. This kind of card gets highly customized and can be, for example, used only for one thing. If you know your child needs to have access to something at work or something that they do, it can be customized so that's the only vendor that it will work with. Or it can be limited so that it's not food and not shelter and that sort of thing. It is not transferable, so it doesn't break the rules that Social Security has put around gift cards, gift certificates, and credit cards. And just recently there was a POMS, again, a POMS, P-O-M-S, is the rules that Social Security puts out for its own workers. There's a recent POMS report that just kind of gave a blessing to the TrueLink card. There's some restrictions. It has to be, the parent or the trustee has to be the administrator, the card administrator. The child himself can't be the card administrator. But you can receive alerts if the child is trying to use it at some place that's not appropriate. You as the administrator would receive the monthly statements. So it's a useful tool. And it's different in the sense that it's not like a credit card where you can use it anywhere and it has no limit. You can have a limit of $100 or $50 on the card at any given time. So if you wanted to look at the rules, that's the POMS. If you Google POMS and then that number, it'll come up. Social Security POMS are found at ssa.gov. And if you wanted to look up anything else on the POMS, you go to ssa.gov and you type in POMS and then the topic, like trusts or income or whatever. It's kind of a confusing document and it's like this big if it's on paper, because we used to get it in paper form and you have to change all the pages all the time. But it's online now and it's really accessible. It's good to know. Okay, so I don't know whether, have all of you gone through applying for benefits yet? Or are you at 18? If some of you have children who are already 18 and older, you may have gone through some of this. But in any case, if your child is still in school till the age of 22, the school is by federal law is required to provide transition planning, so I'm hopeful that you're not having any trouble with the school providing that part. But after school, there are no federal safeguards, no safety net, and so you're kind of on your own, and you need to know what agencies can be helpful. So those are called PASS agencies. Pre-admission screening. This is an agency, and I think here it is Community Alternatives Unlimited. Okay, and they help access benefits, and there's a screening to determine what is it a mental illness? Is it a developmental disability? What is it that the child is going to need after school is no longer an option, federally required school. So, important to be on the PUNS list. That's a list that is based on the priority of need. It's priority, urgency of need, and if, for example, someone is on the list and been on the list forever but lives at home and has a little day program and whatever, they are not going to be on the high priority list. An example would be an 80-year-old mother with her 60-year-old son, and the 80-year-old mother dies, and there are no family members. This person is in desperate need of a placement. So they're going to go to the top of that list. But for this age group, it's just going to be what are the options, and part of the screening process is determining the level of disability, and there's going to be an ICAP score. That's what are the abilities, what can the child do for him or herself, and what needs to be addressed. And so that's an important part of that development of the program, is determining the level of disability. And you should be prepared, in other words, to present things that show the disability. The point of this is planning for when you're not there. What is the child going to need? Can they take their medication? Can they access things without being prompted? And if you make your child sound higher functioning, you don't get as good a score to get and access benefits. And actually, people at the PUNS list, PUNS on the PUNS group and pass agencies are going to be helpful. And I meant to go back here. Those three are important websites to look at, and they can be helpful in finding out more what you need to do. Okay, so how do you get your child in a position to be eligible for these benefits? If you get your child all set up and you don't do any planning of your own assets, let's say you are really good and you've gotten everything out of the child's name, anything that the child has is in an ABLE or it's they just don't have assets, let's say. If you die without a will, your assets are going to be shared with your spouse and your children. That's by state law. And you don't have any say as to where your assets go if you don't have a will. So your child is going to inherit in his or her name, and if it's more than $2,000 or 1/3 of the house or whatever, it's going to make the child ineligible for benefits. So at the very least, you have to have a will that specifically does not leave anything to your child with a disability. One of the options in the past had been to disinherit a child and assume that other siblings would take care of the child, or that the child would just then not have assets that would kick them off of government benefits, and then they could just have government benefits. Anticipating that a sibling is going to take care of a child, even if you put it in the will, I leave, my son Johnny, who is not disabled, money, $50,000, and make sure he takes care of his brother. Well, if Johnny has a car accident that's his fault, or his wife divorces him and wants money, if the money is in his name, it's available to be taken by other people. So it's not really safeguarded and saved for the child with a disability. So some other ways to provide are life insurance, IRAs, and pensions. The thing about IRAs and life insurance, you have to make sure that you have designated it appropriately. And if you just say on your life insurance policy to my spouse, if he or she is then living, otherwise to my children, it's going to go outright to all your children, and including a child with a disability. So that could be an issue. The same is true with IRAs. And pensions, that's a separate category, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But pensions can be available to be used to provide, but there are some special rules depending on the kind of pension. Is it a veterans? Is it a school? Is it teachers? Is it municipal? There are different rules based on the source of the pension as to what kind of trust it can be put to, or whether it can be put in trust at all. Okay, so I talked about this. A morally obligated gift would be one that you give to your well child in order to take care of a child with a disability. It's not creditor proof. If the child has credit issues, the money could be taken to pay for creditors. It's not legally enforceable. He can't be forced to pay for his brother if it's in his name. So with a will, you have to name an executor, and you can, by doing a will, you can avoid having assets go to your child with a disability. You can direct the assets as you want. You avoid a surety bond, which is something that if you die intestate and you have a house and $200,000, you're going to have to pay a surety bond that's 1.5 times the value of your estate assets. And that's a cost that is incurred every year that the estate is open. If you have a will and you name an executor, presumably you trust the executor not to run away with the money, you avoid paying that surety bond. If you have a child with a disability and you want to leave money for the child and you need to plan for that, you have to have a supplemental needs trust. If you, unless you're going to do something like an immorally obligated gift, the only way is to specifically set aside, either in the will or a separate standalone trust, a supplemental needs trust that would receive the money that you designate to go to the child with a disability. So your document in your will, for example, you have to set up the special needs trust, and in the will it's going to say, but anything that would otherwise go to my son Johnny goes to the Johnny Jones Supplemental Needs Trust. So it would not go to Johnny's name individually, it would go to the trust. It would be available then for the child's shares, then protected to be able to be used for benefits. And the child has no right to demand the money out of a properly written supplemental needs trust. And so it's not going to be a resource. Social Security can't say, no, you can pay for yourself, because the child has no right to demand that money. The trustee has discretion to use the funds as the trust directs. So another option in lieu of a will, or actually it's in addition to a will, is a revocable living trust. This is a trust that you create to hold your assets during your lifetime, and it's a way to avoid probate. You transfer all of your assets that don't have a title, don't have a designated beneficiary. Life insurance and IRA are the basic ones that have a beneficiary name. So those are not probate assets. A probate asset would be a house that's in your name, and bank accounts or investments or things like that. And you would transfer your title to your house and transfer your assets to this trust. You are your own trustee. It's revocable. You can sell and buy anything you want in or out of the trust. And the thing is, legally, you're a trustee for yourself, but it acts as though you have complete access and control over the money. The key to this is that in the document you name a successor trustee, so that if you become disabled, you don't have to have a guardian appointed for you. Your successor trustee takes over and helps manage the assets and can pay your bills and can pay things to support your child with a disability, or your spouse if you have a spouse at that point. And even at your death, the successor trustee can continue to manage the account, and it's seamless, so that you don't have to stop, get an executor appointed like in a probate matter, and the trustee can, as I said, can just continuously pay your bills, pay your funeral, and then separate the account to the spouse or the children, the special needs trust, or whatever. It has the advantage of avoiding probate and avoiding guardianship for you if something happens to you. It's treated as your account. Because it's revocable, the IRS says, well, you could revoke this anytime, so you use your own Social Security number and you file your same 1040, so there's no excess tax work that you have to do to have this kind of trust. And again, the point is, this is the document that says, at my death, set aside this to the special needs trust, or this to the spouse, or whatever you're going to be doing. So in lieu of putting those dispositive sections in your will, you put them in the trust. You have a will that's called a pour-over will, which really only handles things if you forgot to put something in your trust. So to create a supplemental needs trust, and some people ask, is there a difference between a supplemental needs trust, a special needs trust? No. Different people use different terms, and I usually try to use supplemental needs trust when I mean a third-party trust. And when I want to speak about a first-party trust, which is the child's money and has all those other rules, I usually say OBRA, O-B-R-A, which is the acronym for the legislation that brought that kind of trust about. So some people would call this a special needs trust, same thing. The point is that with a standalone, a supplemental needs trust can be what's called embedded in your will or your trust, and the document, your will or your trust specifically says, at my death, fund the Johnny Jones Supplemental Needs Trust according to section 2 below. And you then you set out what are the rules for that supplemental needs trust. That's one way to do it. Another way is to have what's called a standalone, which means it's a trust that stands alone. It's out there, it's not funded necessarily, but it could be, and it's not in your will or in your living trust. And one of the reasons for that is that it is revocable, so that if there are changes in the law, for example, a number of clients of ours 20 years ago, we set up supplemental needs trusts and had language about what they could use the money for, and they named trustees and whatever. They come back 20 years later, and the trustees they named, who were their mom and dad, are now deceased. And so it should be revocable so that until it actually gets funded and used at your death, you can make changes. And you don't have to, and it's easy to make a change. It's an amendment, 1 or 2 page document that says, I now name, my sibling or my son, who is now 35, to be the trustee, so that you can make those changes without a lot of problem. A testamentary supplemental needs trust is the kind that is embedded in your will. A couple things are important about deciding to set up a special needs trust, and that's choosing the trustee. You need to make sure that you choose someone who is going to have understanding of what the rules are and how to make sure that when they use and manage the trust, that they don't sabotage it by making incorrect distributions or using the funds improperly, and possibly jeopardizing benefits. So it would be helpful if they were somewhat knowledgeable, and you should maybe have them come to something with you so that they would get an idea of what the rules are. It has to be somebody who has a little bit of time to do the job, has to be a record keeper, because Social Security can ask, even if it's a third-party trust, they can ask, what was the money spent for? How was it used? And if it shows that money was paid directly to the person with a disability, Social Security can say, well, your person got unearned income. So it's important to be a good record keeper. It could be a professional. There are some, if it's a significant enough amount of money, banks can be trustee. There are some professional not-for-profit agencies that can be a trustee if it's not a large amount of money. There are some that will take special needs trusts that are $20,000 or $30,000, and they will manage, and their fees are based on the activities that they actually do, as opposed to flat fees like some of the larger banks charge. So if you don't have a family member who is capable and you trust, then you can have not-for-profit or fiduciary, corporate fiduciary. If it's your money or not the child's money, you get to choose who is the remainder. The remainder beneficiary is the person who would take the money after your child with a disability dies. It could be other children. It could be a facility that your child has been in if you have only one child and you want to help Misericordia or Glenkirk or some other place that your child had been. But it could be anybody. That's your choice. You're making this document. Unlike the OBRA, which, as I said, the first payment goes back to the government. In an OBRA, where it's the child's money, after the government is paid back, after Medicaid is paid back, if there's money left over, it could go to a beneficiary that you name, but the government gets paid back in full before that. Whereas in this, there's no payback, and you get to choose. If a trust is set up now, it can sit dormant basically for 20 years or 30 years until you die and it gets funded at your death. It doesn't become a taxpayer until it's actually funded. We talk about adding $10 or $20 as an asset to a trust, and the reason for that is that you can't have a dry trust in Illinois, and a dry trust is a trust that is not funded at all. When we say that it has $20, it's just that you clip a $20 bill to the back page, and if you need it for pizza sometime, you can use it, but then put it back. But the point is, it's identifying what's called a res, R-E-S, which is Latin for thing, and in planning law, trust law, the trust has to have something in it because you can't have a trustee with nothing to do. So it's not really funded. We don't call it funded until you put, $1,000 or $2,000 or $10,000 or whatever dollars into it. When you fund it and you have to open a bank account, you're going to have a tax ID number, and it's not going to be anybody's social. A third-party trust is a totally separate taxpayer. One of the reasons you might not fund it during your lifetime is because it becomes a taxpayer, and the tax rates are very high. At about $12,000, the tax rate is 38%. So more than a third of the income goes to taxes. So you don't really want to fund it early unless there's a reason, like if grandma left money to it, you don't want to say no. But there are ways to make the income less, or if the income is distributed out for the beneficiary, it reduces the income that is taxable to the trust itself. And the income that gets passed out to the beneficiary is taxed to the beneficiary, who presumably is in a very low tax bracket. So there are once it's funded, it's important to discuss with us or someone, what are the tax implications of having funded it. A third-party trust can be a homeowner. It can buy a home and be and in many cases, a couple families get together, one supplemental needs trust owns the home and the other people pay rent or use their state grant and pay for help in the home, maybe a caregiver that's there a couple hours a day or all day. But the trust can own a home, or can own a home that the child with a disability completely lives in and only by himself. So, and again, the remainder beneficiary options are there. So we have a book on home ownership. If you ask and go to our website, you can ask and get a copy of that book about owning homes. So that's community living, coordinating the funding sources of various children to be able to live together if you've got high-functioning children. And it's beneficial to them to not live at home with mom and dad forever, or in a larger group facility. This is a way that Supplemental Needs Trust can help fund that and work with that. If you do that kind of planning, there are other things that you need to think about: leases and who's going to be obligated to fix the roof, and other kinds of housing issues that relate to owning a house that's going to have other members. Okay, so what happens if grandma does leave money to your child directly? And if it's more than $2,000, that's going to kick the child off of benefits. What can you do? Well, that's what that OBRA safety net is kind of for. Planning for child's assets, that would be something that child has a right to, a legal right to. For example, child support, it's the legal right of the child to receive that money. So it can't go in a third party or a special supplemental needs trust. It's the right of the child. You have to have a court order directing in the divorce to have the child support irrevocably assigned to the OBRA. Then it is not income to the child. If you are divorced and you have your child with a disability living with you, and your ex-spouse is paying you $500 a month as child support, that's $500 of unearned income to the child. So that would reduce SSI, and so you're really no further along. Reducing dollar for dollar, it's unearned. The key to that is to go back into court and get a court order directing the ex-spouse's child support to be irrevocably assigned to an OBRA trust. Okay. These are things that cannot be paid directly to the OBRA. Yes, SSI is the right of the child, but there are some things in the POMs that POMs have said, that Social Security has said, these cannot be put in the OBRA. So, certain pensions, they need to go, they can't be put into an OBRA at all, things that are through ERISA. There are some pensions, for example, retired teachers, they can assign, there's special language that has to be in your trust for them to approve it, but then the teacher's retirement pension can, for a disabled child, can go into an OBRA. So the OBRA payback has to hold the individual's money. There's a payback before any other creditor or beneficiary or the funeral home. There's strict distribution language, the sole benefit rules. There's, as I said with the POMs, there was a recent long POMs about can the OBRA trust pay for travel? How many people can it pay for the one caregiver? It can't pay for the whole family to take a trip. So what can it pay for? So that's one of the, could it pay for the trustee to come from California and check on their ward, their person over which they're guardian or their their beneficiary in Chicago? The old POM said no, unless it was for the specific purpose of taking them to medical treatment. And they had to live in a facility. The new POMs have expanded that. Teresa Varnet, who's my legal partner, was on the committee that worked with Social Security saying, this is really very onerous to not be able to allow the trustee to go visit and help with maybe an IEP or some other planning issues that are not specifically medical. So it's important to understand that sole benefit has been relaxed somewhat. Okay, an OBRA trust is considered the income of the person with the disability, the beneficiary. It's a grantor trust, Grantor, which if you have a trust for yourself, like I spoke of earlier, the revocable trust for yourself, that's a grantor trust. That means the income comes in and it's treated as yours for tax purposes. So it's always important to remember when you talk about income and what's taxable that you're talking about, are you talking about income under Social Security rules or under IRS rules? So for IRS rules, income in a OBRA trust is taxable to the beneficiary. Again, it's presumably at a lower tax rate. So, okay, there are specific rules to who can establish and how you establish an OBRA trust. There are specific rules governing how you administer it, distribution limitations, too much to go into, but if you have assets belonging to the child, it's very important that you understand what those rules are. Again, child support has to be irrevocably assigned by a court order. Another option of planning for the parents is this pay on death account. You can accumulate funds. You don't have to do the laundering of their money. You could just start setting aside, just like if you put $100 in your IRA every month, you could put $100 in this POD account and save up for to put it, and it wouldn't be a taxpayer. Like if you put it in, started funding your third-party special needs trust, you're creating a taxpayer. If you do a POD account, it's your income, your money, and you pay the tax on it at a lower rate, presumably, than the trust at 39%. The POD, the point is, at death, you can have it payable to the Supplemental Needs Trust. If, God forbid, your child predeceases you, your child with a disability, you can change pay on death to something else. You could even take the account, take the account, but you could make it pay on death to another child, or you can make a change to it. Okay, in your planning, there are things to just avoid. Teachers' pensions, as I said, you have to have a special language in the trust, in the special needs trust. You need to make sure that you do a will and a special needs trust. You have to check for the assets and income limits and deeming questions. And you have to talk to other family members, because as wonderful it is for grandma to leave money, you really do want to make sure that, if you can, avoid the issue of having it come to the child directly, because then you have to do the overtrust. It just is easier planning if it's done with a supplemental needs trust rather than an OBRA. Another thing that's an important part of your planning is this letter of intent. Just email our firm. We can send you a copy of what we have as our letter of intent. It is a document, and it can be as long as or short as you want, or your child's needs dictate. Ours is very, very comprehensive, and a lot of it you could just disregard if it doesn't apply to your child. But it allows you to put down so that if something happened to you, someone who had to step into your shoes would know as much as you can possibly tell them about your child. Things that other people, siblings even, don't necessarily know, or your siblings don't know, if the aunt and uncle of the child, if they're going to be the ones stepping in to take care of your child. Things like, what are they afraid of? Who's their best friend? Is there a bully at school that's an issue? Who's their doctor? All of their doctors. What medications do they take? How do you administer the medications? Are there things that are particular issues that way? What are your when you do have funds set aside, what are your plans? Were you working on trying to open or organize a small SILA to buy a house and have other people similarly situated help with and live there? What are your plans for your child? So, and it changes, medications change, so we recommend that you review and update this once a year, maybe on the child's birthday. It makes you think about it, and you fix it and change it. Doctors change, for one thing, addresses change. It just makes it a lot easier for someone who takes over after you to know all of these personal things about your child. These are two planning guides that I recommend. The top one is basically starts out at infant age. If you know your child has a disability at that young age, what are the things you do all along in preschool, in elementary school, and what are the things that you need to know and plan for? So that's a very helpful book. And the other one, again, is Planning for the Future. How do you structure, how do you think about it? That Planning for the Future is somewhat dated, so certainly any dollar amounts that talk about SSI and dollar amounts and things are going to be wrong, but the theory is helpful. To know more about guardianship or that, but there are options to guardianship. Guardianship is when it's the child is incapable, totally incapable of making decisions for him or herself, wouldn't take medicine, would walk into the street, just can't make decisions. It's called plenary or full guardianship. If that's not necessary, what are the ways that anything can be less restrictive? One of the ways of having less restrictive, the ability to help your child, is a power of attorney. If your child has the ability to decide that he or she would like you to help them, they probably have sufficient knowledge to be able to enter into the contract, which is what the power of attorney really is, to say, Mom or Dad, you can help me. I'll let you help make decisions. And there's some benefits there, obviously. It's revocable, which if the child has a fight with you, they could rip it up and then you're back at square one. But it's not for lifetime. Guardianship, on the other hand, is court monitored. You're in court, or you have to file a report annually. It's not easily reversed. Most times, if a person has a developmental disability, it's not going to go away, and so that you're going to be in guardianship court forever. Obviously, if it's needed and the child has no ability to even say, I would like mom to help me and do a power of attorney, then there's no alternative but guardianship. Assets can be held in joint accounts, and that might be helpful. Joint accounts, however, are resources, and so you have to be a little careful with those. A representative payee is an account where if the child gets SSI or SSDI, childhood disability benefits, there is a direct deposit account they must go in. If that child is not capable of managing that account, him or herself, they have to have a representative payee. That's just the name that Social Security puts on the person who manages it. And Social Security is the one who has the final say whether or not a person needs to have a representative payee. There are some decisions you can and cannot make if you're a guardian. So if you're a guardian, you still can't forego life-sustaining treatment like a DNR. You can't have your child sterilized without a court order. Without a court order, you can't do estate planning for a person with disability. If there is if your child has testamentary capacity to make a will, then that has to be determined by the court and then the child can make a will if necessary. And that's a very limited situation, but there are some other statutes that deal with health questions regarding persons who can't answer for themselves. These are two. It's important to know that if your child suffers from a mental illness disability as opposed to a developmental disability, the rules are different. You can't force, even if you're a guardian, you can't force a child to be put into a mental health facility. There has to be a mental health hearing. It's a different set of rules. Okay, so what are we going to take away from this? One of them is how can we avoid pitfalls of things that happen or could happen if we aren't paying attention? Commingling the funds is one. In other words, putting SSI in a third-party account, putting child's earnings in a different account in a third-party trust, any of those commingling of accounts. Pretty important. I know it's kind of a pain to have multiple accounts, but pretty important. And if you're likely to have things be confusing to your child, it might be helpful to have the accounts at a different bank, two different banks, so you see the checkbook, you go, oh, I know this is not right. So, making inappropriate distributions in cash and gifts out of a trust. If it's an OBRA, the sole benefit rule. If it's a third-party trust, it still might be that you can't give cash to the beneficiary if they're on SSI because you're going to have to report it. It's required once you apply for SSI or any of the benefits. Part of the rules, if you read them all the way to the end, you're required, otherwise it's fraud, if you do not report unearned income. So these are, after 10 days at the end of the month, you have to report these kinds of things. It's unearned income and gifts from grandma. If you wait too long to start planning, there can be issues. There are look-back periods for some of the things that you might want to do. If your child is under the age of 18, you can't just, if they have a UTMA, a Uniform Transfer to Minors Act that grandma gave them, or they have $2,000 or $4,000 in government bonds that grandma gave, you can't just give those away right before their 18th birthday and expect to get on benefits, because there is a look-back period. Important to think about what is the child-centered plan. That's just what is the best for the child in terms of, and what are their needs, what are their desires? Are they happier in a bigger group setting? Are they worried about certain kinds of job placements? Think about that as much as what are the issues for the family and members helping to take care of. Failure to adjust beneficiaries on insurance, IRAs, and pensions. It's pretty important that you check that. You know, you can do the will and the trust and special needs trust and all of that planning, but if you forget to say that your IRA goes to the supplemental needs trust, that could be a problem. U.S. savings bonds, they could be in your name for the benefit of your child or in whatever. Those are considered assets of the child, joint accounts, unless you prove otherwise. So Internet documents, those are a problem. A lot of them are expect to be okay in every state. Well, different states have different rules about special needs trust, and what requirements there are that makes a trust a valid trust. So you can't just use documents that are all over the internet. Multiple ABLE accounts is a problem. Question.